Hello everyone, welcome to That's the Tea. My name is Bantaji Sakwala and here with me is Dr. Iqbal Survé. He's the chairman of the Sekunjalo Group and today we'll be discussing the Sagarmatha Holdings, which is a subsidiary under Sekunjalo Group. Good day, Dr. Survé. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me on your show, Ms. T.
Thank you. 2 weeks ago, Sekunjalo had sued the presidency as well as various other organs of state for an amount worth $4 billion US, which is estimated at being 75 billion rand. Now, we've also received a statement from Sagarmatha stating that this presidency will be sued as the potential for summons for the JSE as well as the SARB, totaling $3 billion, which is a significant amount of money. How does this differ from the Sekunjalo case?
Well, thank you for asking me that, because you're right about when I was in Davos, Sekunjalo Holdings instituted a summons Section 3 notice to the state, which then follows as a summons follows for an amount of $4 billion. And that is against the presidency, the organs of state, including various departments of government, etc., for an abuse of power and for the damages caused, as has been calculated, the current damages to the group, not future earnings. Now, that was very widely publicized both here and internationally, and there's been great feedback, in particular internationally, that for the first time, somebody is holding the South African presidency to account for an abuse of power. Of course, from our point of view, it's never easy to sue our government. It's kind of brings about a mixture of feelings, but for a long time, we've been pleading with the government and the presidency and ministers in various departments to please stop the abuse of power. And it's directed at us because we're the owner of the largest media group in the country. And it's aimed at silencing us. And so, we've tried to get them to see reason, but they haven't done so. But in the process, we've suffered huge damages. We have thousands of employees and their lives are at stake. And so we owe it to them to actually, do this and recover these monies from the state. The Sagarmatha Technologies Limited has sued Section 3 sort of suit against the government, which is similar in one respect. It's also against the presidency. It's also against other organs of state, but it differs slightly in that it also cites the JSE, which is the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, for its role in the damages which Sagarmatha has in fact suffered. Now, these are different because the damages that Sekunjalo suffered is calculated based on its existing businesses. It's more than 200 companies in about 40 African countries and overseas. And it's various businesses ranging from technology to media, to resources, to e-commerce, etc., etc., etc. Sagarmatha is very specifically a technology company, and in itself it has suffered damages in the region of about say 55 billion rand, or between $2.5 to $3 billion more or less. And so it has instituted its own suit against the presidency and the government, and it is differentiated by the fact that a party to this suit will become essentially the Johannesburg Stock Exchange as well, which is a public company as well in its own right.
Interesting. I hear that Sagarmatha is a multi-sided platform company. Can it be compared to giants like Amazon and Reuters or Bloomberg?
You're absolutely right. If you look at the Sagarmatha prospectus, when it was listing firstly on the JSE in 2018, it was a very thick prospectus, and it is a multi-sided platform, which means that it's a business with multiple businesses, platform, consumer-facing, business-facing businesses. It included multiple e-commerce companies in there. It included digital media, AI companies. It included syndication services. And so in a way, it is much smaller in size than the likes of Amazon, which is a $2 trillion company, or the likes of Reuters and Bloomberg, which are in the tens of billions of dollars in their own right. But it's a large company for the African continent, and it's certainly the first unicorn company on the African continent. And in terms of multi-sided platform companies, it certainly would have been one of the largest companies on the African continent had it listed as it was going to do on one of the international stock exchanges, such as either New York or NASDAQ or Hong Kong.
And so with this, this legal case suing for $3 billion, it's quite a substantial move. What has caused this this decision to take this legal route?
Well, we have been very patient because we made a formal application to the Reserve Bank, the SARB, South African Reserve Bank. So just to give background to our international viewers, South Africa has got exchange control. And right until 2018, no South African companies were allowed to do a primary listing overseas. In other words, they first had to list on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange and then do a secondary listing overseas. In 2018, the Reserve Bank put out a briefing note which said that tech media companies and biotech companies will be allowed to do a primary listing overseas. Now, this was to prevent capital flight from the country, and that's why they didn't allow primary listings, because South Africa had exchange control regulations in place. But in 2018, NASPERS, that's very close to Cyril Ramaphosa, were given by the Reserve Bank the permission to actually list primary in Amsterdam under the major asset of theirs, Tencent, under a company called Prosus. That has led so far to $1 trillion leaving South Africa today. You know, it's not something that people are very aware of, how much funds have actually, how much money as a result of the listing of NASPERS or Prosus in Amsterdam has actually left South Africa. How much, let's be precise and say how much value has left South Africa. When that happened, because Sagarmatha is a much smaller company than NASPERS in terms of size, but it qualified in terms of the briefing note that tech media companies could list primary listing. Sagarmatha had initially wanted to list on the JSE, and I'll come back to that later. But when that window opened up, Sagarmatha made a formal application to the South African Reserve Bank to list on an international stock exchange. That application was done through our corporate advisors. It was done through the banks at the time. And it was followed up with a meeting at the South African Reserve Bank offices, the head offices, the headquarters, with the Deputy Governor responsible for international listings for offshore at the South African Reserve Bank, along with about a number of his officials, as well as Vunani Corporate Finance and our Sagarmatha team. At that meeting at the Reserve Bank, they confirmed that firstly, we had qualified in terms of the briefing note. We'd met all the criteria. Secondly, they confirmed that it's a positive thing because we had raised $400 million from international investors. Most of that money would be coming 80%. In fact, they wanted from us to some extent, not a guarantee, but an undertaking softly, that most of that funds would come to South Africa for creating youth employment in technology, which we were quite happy to do because we wanted to employ about 5,000 young people in technology on the multi-sided platform businesses. And the SARB was actually quite happy with that, entire process. Now, what happened next was quite bizarre because when we left the meeting with the SARB, the Reserve Bank, and the Deputy Governor, it was a fait accompli. It was kind of end November, beginning December 2018. And we were told emphatically we should get permission by the latest February 2019. Now, of course, you're probably going to ask me what happened next, which is really quite bizarre. But today we understand why it happened, because we understand that, we've been targeted by the presidency, his ministers, and organs of state, which, the SARB is a quasi-organ of state. Although it's an independent body, the Reserve Bank, it is still by legislation linked to the state. So we were targeted in that, and you can draw your own conclusions. After hearing from the Reserve Bank in February, they were still busy with the application. I think there was a little bit of more information perhaps that they needed, but we sent it all to them. They came back to us. Everything was very positive. And again, it was a fait accompli. We would get the permission to list because, as I've said, they gave that permission to NASDAQ, the Afrikaans media house during apartheid, which then listed Proces in Amsterdam. I think almost a year went by. And the next thing is they told us that, no, unfortunately, this application, which speaks to their non-independence, so to speak, has now to be referred to National Treasury for the go-ahead. We found that very unusual because now why, if SARB is responsible for offshore listings and they gave permission to NASDAQ, why would they now send our application to National Treasury? We were also aware at the time that some of the officials in National Treasury, which I've publicly stated, such as Ismail Mamayat, who was very close to Pravin Gordhan, are very hostile to us. And I previously accused them of sabotaging us in a completely different area. Now, at the time, the Reserve Bank came back to us and said, National Treasury now says they cannot give us the go-ahead because they have to wait for the Party Commission, which we mustn't forget was really manipulated and set up by Ramaphosa in order to smear Sekunjalo and target us. Hence this part of the reason why we're suing the presidency, right? And after all of that happened, 2 or 3 years went by. And so it was something which should have taken 2 months. They stalled us, prevented us from listing internationally. We had raised $400 million. These investors, became frustrated. We couldn't buy a target company. Jumia was a target for us. And Jumia went and listed itself. We were going to buy Jumia with some of the shares that MTN had in Jumia for $150 million at the time. Jumia went and listed on the New York Stock Exchange, I think it was, for $2 billion. So it shows the value that we lost by them not giving us this opportunity. So in the end, bizarrely, they came back towards I think it was 2021, towards the end or so, and said to us, no, sorry, National Treasury now says you have to do the application all over again. So 3 years have passed. We lost the opportunity to go and list on the New York Stock Exchange, the NASDAQ. The Hong Kong were busy changing their rules, which they now did, so we could now be accommodated. And we would have had a listing of between $5 and $10 billion based on the valuation, was done in San Francisco and in New York. That is still very small, speaking, just to be clear, in context and relatively speaking, $5 to $10 billion in the New York Stock Exchange is very tiny compared to other multi-sided platform companies whose market capitalization, the smallest ones could be around about 25, 30 billion. The larger ones could be in the region of about $2 trillion. So just to give you context, in South African terms, it might seem like a lot. So we were stopped by the Reserve Bank from doing all of this. And it is quite clear that that instruction came specifically from the presidency, from some of the ministers, from the state organs, and the Reserve Bank was complicit in actually preventing us from listing overseas. And there was no rational basis for them to be able to do this. They never came back and said, well, you don't meet the criteria, you don't qualify in terms of this. No, on the contrary, they were very clear. We qualified fully to be able to do a primary listing offshore. We had even gone to the New York Stock Exchange with the team. We're given the opportunity to be on the podium, to ring the bell. You know, we had done all those things. We had visited the NASDAQ, we had visited the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and we were warmly received because on our international advisory board of Sagarmatha, we had several dollar billionaires globally. We had some of the CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world. We had a board that no South African company up to today has, you know, in terms of international stature. Chairman of the International Advisory Board of Sagarmatha was in fact the first black person to have a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. Harold Doley, Ambassador Harold Doley of Doley Securities. So this was a lost opportunity for South Africans, for employment, for funds coming back into South Africa, and generally to put the country on the map, because this was Africa's first unicorn.
So do you believe that the situation and the findings from the PIC gravely affected you future-wise in terms of Sagarmatha's progression? Or do you believe that...
Well, let's put it differently. The Party Commission, in our view, was used to smear our group. And we have taken the Party Commission on review. And so what has been the government's response? Instead of trying to deal with it, going to court on the matter, they've stalled the review. For almost 2.5 years, they've made all sorts of excuses. They've done X, Y, and Z. And, you know, we've tried to make it very clear. And of course, it suits them to let it hang in the air. The Party Commission didn't make any findings against us. It said there needed to be further investigations in connection with the PIC. But I think what's important to know, when the PIC took a different business altogether, it's got nothing to do with Sagarmatha. When it took IO to court, for the first time, the version of the PIC was that, in fact, of IO's version. So whatever was said in the Party Commission, the very people that spoke at the Party Commission changed their version when it came to court. And that's what we said in our review application. We said to them, you know, here are the facts, because we were never given the opportunity to present the facts by a party. We were never given that opportunity. We're simply given, it's like someone, you know, making an allegation against you, and you're not given the opportunity to clear it. The first time we had an opportunity to clear it was with the PIC-IO court case, where, of course, the evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor, right, in terms of the facts at the time. However, it's important to know one important factor here. Sagarmatha has got nothing to do with the PIC. The PIC did not invest in Sagarmatha at all. We had, in fact, raised $400 million from international investors from various countries, billionaires from Hong Kong, from India, from Russia, from the US, that were part, from Europe, that were part of the listing of Sagarmatha internationally. So it is absurd to even suggest that, you know, because there was this Party Commission, there are two separate issues. In any event, Sagarmatha could have still listed. The Party Commission could have still done what they wanted to do. But the reality is, it doesn't suit the presidency and this government to, in fact, have the Party Commission reviewed. I can give you one more important fact. The commissioners of the Party Commission that were party to that withdrew their opposition to our review.
Okay.
That's important. So the only person that's opposing the review of the Party Commission, who's opposing it in, let's just put it in theory as opposed to practice, is the President. All the even commissioners themselves have withdrawn because they realize the folly of the Party Commission. And they didn't want to be party to be called into a courtroom and then to be held to account. So they all, Jill Marcus withdrew, the other commissioners withdrew. So the presidency erred by accepting the Party Commission without asking us, to look at it. And it has done great damage to us. But of course, it was all intentional. At the end of the day, this is because independent media has exposed the looting and corruption under the Ramaphosa administration, whether it is, with Pala Pala, whether it is with PPEs, whether it was the Ramaphosa CR17 campaign. And because of that, we are being punished by Ramaphosa. Mm-hmm. And of course, some of his personal issues, which I don't agree with exposing that, but nonetheless, it was done by our editors. The point of the matter is, because of that, they are very angry with us and they want to destroy our businesses because our media has been brave enough, courageous enough. All the other media has actually been bought by Ramaphosa and his funders. And you look at the common funders of the other media, the Oppenheimers, the Ruperts who fund, the Soroses who fund Daily Maverick, News 24's Koos Becker. Ramaphosa allowed him to take R1 trillion offshore. So of course he's going to support Ramaphosa. The other guys are, given freebies by Pravin Gordhan. I won't go into the details of it. But the fact is, we are the only guys that are truly independent out there. And there's a vicious campaign by Ramaphosa and some of his ministers, organs of state, to crush us, to destroy us, irrespective of the consequence in terms of employment, in terms of the legacy of empowerment, etc. So it is not easy to take our government to court. The ANC government, to a big extent, is our government. I've come out of that particular structures of the struggle. But we've appealed to them to come to their senses and to stop prejudicing a black organization that has existed and has empowered so many people in this country and has been so successful just because you have a problem with independent media and because you have a problem with me, because frankly speaking, I'm outspoken. I support my editors. I give them the independence to be able to do the right thing because we love our country. We want to see our country succeed. And because of that, we've paid the price of tens of billions, and hence this damages suit. Hopefully the government will use the 6 months of the Section 3 notice in terms of the Institutional Act to come to their senses. But knowing, some of the people involved with Ramaphosa, they may not, but that's okay. We'll go to court. And then they'll have the opportunity to come to court and present their point of view, and we'll have the opportunity to come to court and present our point of view. What's important for us in all of this is that if they go to court, we hope that they put their facts on the table, because for the first time, the public will be able to see what the facts are from their side, because we know there are no facts on their side. We know this is all political. Importantly for us, that information is going to be important to institute a case against the South African government in the courts in the United Kingdom and the USA. So they know they're caught between the devil and the dark blue sea, because if they don't stop with their harassment, intimidation, and mafia tactics against our organization, putting at risk all of our employees and customers and suppliers and, 40,000 people being affected by all of this, we have no choice but to defend ourselves here and in international courts. But we're starting here as a kind of wake-up call to government, to the presidency, and saying, listen, stop all of this nonsense of yours, stop this intimidation, stop this harassment, stop bullying our organ, and accept the freedom of the press, for goodness sake. We fought for freedom. Why not accept that? Why not accept there is going to be elements of the press that may not agree with you, that is going to expose certain things. And so that is really, the rationale behind all of that.
This has been a very interesting conversation and very enlightening. Thank you for sharing your insights with us on this very complex matter, and all the best for you and Sagarmatha in the future.
Thank you so much. And I think it's going to be good that we hold our government to account. But more importantly, it's going to be good for our employees that have really suffered through the trauma of being harassed and intimidated by the government of the day, our government. So, so-called government of freedom. It's quite sad that we as a Black organization today have to be dealing, in this situation. Thank you so much, Ms. T.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Survé.